This is awesome, man. This is amazing.
Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to work on a little bit of carpentry project on my friend's well-used Trex deck. You can see he has wood railings, with metal spindles and Trex on the deck, and these railings need stain, and rather than stain them, which is just a pain, as I'm sure many of you know, it's a lot easier if you can use all synthetic like Trex or all metal up there. Problem is, most of those kits cost a small fortune. You're looking at each one of these 8-foot sections. If you were to go with Trex, material-wise, their kits I think run about $800 per section. So I thought of an idea that's going to solve that. It's going to cost about $200 per section, and it's going to look fantastic. We're going to reuse the metal spindles, and we're going to use Trex for the railing and lowers, and then I'm going to reinforce it with some steel. So stick around and see how it's done. So we're going to start by removing the rails, top and bottom. They're screwed into the stucco there, and I may or may not need to mark those. They probably already have some weather stain that I can use as an indicator of where to put the new pieces back. And we have, I think, like 15 or 16 sections. So I'm gonna get started on that, and then we're gonna use the old ones as a template to drill the new. So I just pulled the top rail off, and it was only held into the end by 2 screws and a couple screws into the top here. You can see there's there's what, 2 screw holes in there? I'm gonna take pride in the fact that I might have just saved somebody's life. There's always some sort of surprise like this when I disassemble decks for some reason. So for these handrails, we're using the Trex Select 2x6. It is the type of Trex that has a normal looking board shape to it. Most of the Trex, or even other synthetics, have these weird sort of ridges in the bottom, I guess to save weight and money probably. But we're gonna be building this as if it's dimensional lumber. You'll notice it still flexes a lot. So unlike lumber, which has grain going through it, it won't flex like that. So we're gonna have to reinforce this with steel, which I'll get to later. For now, I'm gonna cut these to the right length for each section. Okay, so we're gonna cut the steel to match the lengths that we need to support the bottom of this setup we're doing here. These are electrical struts, and they have just a really nice rigid form. When you flexing this way, they just don't flex much, and they weigh very little for how sturdy they are, and they're quite affordable. I think they're $40 each at Lowe's or Home Depot. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut those to length on the Evolution saw with the steel blade, which, by the way, if you haven't bought a metal cutting saw like this, basically uses carbide teeth just like a wood cutting saw, but these teeth are angled for the RPM this saw blade runs for specific materials, and it is just so much faster and cleaner and less sparks than you get with an abrasive wheel. Highly recommend. Okay, I got my steel cut and a lot of the railing. I'm gonna take this back to my shop and do the cutting there in terms of the drilling, just to be a little more accurate with my bigger tools. Okay, so I'm in my shop, and this is an illustration of the basic construction. This is gonna be the top rail, and then I'm going to put in, basically, the plan originally was to put a half of one of these, basically rip it down the middle and put it vertically into this top rail, screwed in from the top with 3/4 inch bore holes for the spindles. And unfortunately, the bottom of these Trex boards is brown. So I guess if we went with a brown colored board, it would be fine to do that, just rip it down the middle. But this is a gray deck board, and I think that'll look weird to have this bottom, even if it's facing outward on the deck. So what we're gonna do is rip it into fourths. So this, what I have here is 2.5, well actually 1.25 inches to support it. And then I'm gonna buddy them up. I'm gonna have another one right here, so that we can sort of butt this brown against the brown, and so you'll only see the gray, and that should still look pretty sharp. Okay, what I have here is a sacrificial 2x4x10 that I'm going to use this handheld drill press pretty handy. I like this better than the drill press for working with long boards like this. And it's going to keep vertical cuts. I'm going to use the 3/4 inch Forstner bit on this. I marked the center line of this board so I can line that up with the center line of the Trex boards it's going into, clamp it together, and I'll have a pilot hole that's already vertical for me, which should make it a lot faster than having to use that drill press on every single board. Okay, this is all set up for my jig. Board is centered. Gonna have a hole every 4.5 inches, which will give us 3 3/4 inch spacing. Quick side note, I switched to a double fluted spiral bit. It is about 5 times faster than this Forstner bit. I think a lot of the reason is that it does not get clogged up. This Trex just it's very sticky on your bits, and the spiral flute just helps feed it right out. It's gonna save me a lot of time and effort on these. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I lined up the jig with the old piece, since it was slightly offset to accommodate the right distance at the end, and making sure that the holes line up. So when I screw this piece in, it all lines up with this is going to be the top, this is the bottom. And instead of using clamps, I'm going to just pilot a few spots on here, make sure we have the same distance on either side of the jig so we get the center line, and then use the jig again to drill the holes through this piece so that they all line up in the center. And then I'll be able to use these same holes when I screw this to the top handrail. Okay, there's my base, which will put the steel on the bottom very soon. And here's my top. And I'm using a spacer to do the quick measurement for me so that we are equidistant center line the whole way down. Just a little time saver versus measuring everything. Okay, this is the first set. It is complete. I have corner brackets. This is going to get screwed into the pillars to hit some studs to support. And so this steel channel is supporting this Trex, which is like just a very flexible material. It's also helped leveling it. We're gonna have spindles going in these holes up to the top of these, and then it'll get capped with this piece here on top, and that's the top of the handrail. Can't wait to see how this looks when I get it installed. Okay, just a side note here, I've only ripped a few boards, and man, Trex is ridiculous because it's stuck together with glue basically. You can see it's been binding up on the back of the carbide there, and I could tell it was starting to cut slower. My motor was bogging, and I'm running a 5 horsepower 240 volt saw. So I pulled this. This is my finish blade. It's a Japanese finish blade. It makes a glass smooth cut, but I'm switching to my forest blade because it's more aggressive. It has a bigger relief on the back of the carbide, and hopefully that works better with the Trex material. Okay, back at the job site, I have the first base for these new pickets and rails, and I'm just pre-fitting it, trying to figure out where I want to position these in order to make them up to code and what height I want them at. And so far it looks like a good fit and super sturdy. I mean, that steel rail is really doing its job. So gonna get the first one built and base the others off of that. Okay, I have this lower board positioned where I want it. It's nice and level. And there's a little bit of stucco in there, so I'm gonna get my SDS tool in there and sort of drill out that stucco so I can get these self-tapping SDS, different kind of SDS, strong drive screw, in place. These things, I love them. Not only are they a good value, you don't need a pre-drill if you're just going into wood, and they're extremely strong, and they go in very quick, and you can get them in with your impact driver like so. Okay, working on the top, basically just starting on one side and hammering with my rubber mallet to sort of push these down, tap them into place, and make sure that they all seat correctly and fully. Okay, so you can see, I don't know if you can see the bow, it's bowing in the middle because since there's flexibility in the middle, it just doesn't get the same kind of impact. So I put a piece of leftover scrap there to support it, and I'm gonna use my dead blow hammer to knock that down. It needs to be hit pretty hard to seat these rods. And just in case you didn't notice, these are reused rods from the original project, and they're not cleaned up yet, but we'll get those cleaned up and they'll look great. Okay, first section is done, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. It's sitting a little lower than the old one, since we use these old spindles, but that's actually kind of nice. It's just above the code requirement, and it'll make it nicer for people trying to look outside, look at the nice view we have here when it's, you know, when they're entertaining guests or whatnot on the deck. The final step was to install basically a piece, and I kept all the screws hidden. So I screwed that in, and then screwed that to the top rail from the bottom, so that it holds it left and right. And in case someone bumps it, you'd have to bump this really hard even without a screw in it to make it come off. But very happy with the outcome, and rock solid. No stain. Won't have to deal with maintaining these guys. Now I just have 13 more sections to go. No big deal. Morning guys, back at the job site. We decided to get some longer pickets despite the extra cost, just for safety. So we got these 32-inch pickets. That'll put our deck rail a little over 40 inches. And I noticed that they have a decent powder coat on them, which is great, except for that it makes them very tight to get in these holes. So I'm gonna give this a shot. We're gonna use some soap spray. This is just what my client had handy. And I'm gonna spray the holes and see if that doesn't help get these in easier. And then we'll get these new pickets installed, and you'll get to take a look at the new height pretty soon. Okay, got those taller pickets installed and did a few more sections yesterday, and all the easy stuff's done. So it's time to move on to the fun stuff. And I already pulled this post out here, but I need to make all these posts higher. So I just finished cutting them, and they're 2 3/4 inches taller to get the rail height where it needs to be for these taller pickets. And you know, those posts, they were done. And we used pressure treated lumber this time. It'll probably hold up better. Stay tuned, I'll show you how we're doing it. So for the most part, I was able to just copy the other ones and just add 2 3/4 inch. Did want to tell you how I made this rabbet joint with just a skill saw. I scribed the old one on top of it, made my cross cut here with the skill saw by setting the depth to where I wanted it. Then I used a square to get a 90-degree angle here on both sides, ran the skill saw in both ways, and then used my multi-tool, which is like a chisel bit, but moves really quick. You could always use a hand saw too to cut this final part out. And now we have that rabbet joint, and that's gonna wrap around the deck on that corner back there. I'm gonna get this post in here, and what I'm gonna do is use a 3-inch framing nail just to hold it in place, and then that'll also allow me to get it perpendicular. Then I'll throw another one in to set it, and then we'll drill holes. We don't want to try to get the same holes because there's a good chance we're going to miss. So I'm going to aim at least 1 inch to the side of or below them, so we have fresh lumber to go into, and then it won't make the post all cockeyed. So there you can see I've got the 2 framing nails. Those held it in place, and they give you a little flexibility. You can still bang it around if you need to get the line right. And then I marked the side at the height where the old holes were, and then I just dropped the bolts by 1 inch. And they're offset like that, so I hit the cross member, not the end grain. It's a little stronger hold that way. Got my buddy Peter today, so you can actually see me do some of the work. So I marked again on the sides where those old holes were. I pinned it in place with nails, and I'm gonna offset a little low again. Extra hand. All right, got that clamped in place with 2 3/4 inch hanging down. That puts that top in the right spot. We'll go ahead and nail it like the last one and then move on. I'm gonna use the old hole to guide my drill bit into this new post, and we'll just use that same one since it's going all the way through. Back in the shop, I'm working on the first stair rail section. I'm gonna do this differently than the main sections because it mates up with one of the handrails up top. So I'm gonna still build this section with a steel support versus the other one is gonna be using the actual foundation of the stairs to support the base. And I cut these steel ends on a 45-degree angle. I cut them short just to give us a little bit of play there. They don't need to run the whole entire distance. And then these will end up screwing directly into the lumber themselves. Gonna get this clamped up and installed just like the other ones, but first, need to make my holes in the base and in the part on top that I milled to accept the pickets on the handrail. And so we'll get those holes installed, get the steel installed, and then get the picket and the fascia installed in the top. And we'll do our final cuts on the top in place because I want to scribe this end to match the angle to have a smooth transition from the upper handrail into that deck rail. All right, since we're working with a rail that's going to be on an angle roughly 40 degrees, I'm going to go ahead and use my portable drill press guide here, set at 40 degrees. And I spaced the holes about an inch further apart because as your pickets get angled, they actually get closer together. And so this will still keep them under the 4-inch code requirement. Once I get that piloted, and I'm going to pilot it because it is on an angle, it's just easier to hold that angle. That should help guide that larger 3/4 inch bit through. Okay, so I piloted with the 1/4 inch and then I followed up with a 3/8, and the 3/8 seems to be enough to guide the 3/4 and still stay in the center of the hole. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of those now. Okay, I got all my holes drilled in the base. So now this is going to be for the top, and what I'm doing is I'm lining up this center line that lines up with this because that's basically 5 inches center to center, same here. That puts our ends at the same point. I'm gonna move this over so it's centered, and I'm gonna use wood screws to hold it in place. Wood screws as opposed to the Trex screws, because the Trex screws will break when you back them out. They're not designed for multiple uses like these wood deck screws are. And that's gonna hold this in place, and I'll be using this existing hole as the pilot for the 3/4 inch bit going into this smaller material here. Okay, one of the deals I make with my channel is that I show my mistakes, and I misaligned this. You can see that's where the hole was supposed to come out. It came out there. I should have aligned it like such, and that'll angle it so the hole should come out there. But I do use this stuff called OD Fix-It Stick. When I make a mistake on something that you're either not going to see or that you're going to paint over, it dries in about 5 minutes, and it's hard as a rock. So fortunately, this is an area that you're not going to be able to see, and OD Fix-It Stick fills the hole and will be just as strong as the Trex. All right, I'm working on this strange little vertical section. It's really just to sort of block the edge of the stairs against this void. I'll show once I get it up. But since I was working on these vertical pieces, I didn't really trust my clamps. I'm using clamps and screws as well, just to make sure it doesn't move around on me. And I'm coming in from the top so that the top has that gray part you can see on this one right here, and I'll do the same on the other side as well. Back at the job site, just getting this handrail laid out. I scribed it here to find my cut to make a continuous line there. And right now, and I've got these tie straps to pull these posts to vertical position, and because they're mounted on non-vertical surfaces, and that'll help square the deck out a little bit. This is gonna have to get lifted up so that our 32-inch rods are at the right height. So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm just marking my positions so I can lift it and hold it in place with some hardware. Okay, I installed some brackets. I bent them with some pliers to get them to the angle they need to be to support that. And that's just gonna make it a lot easier to install. Plus it keeps it sturdy, like the rest of them using those brackets. The only difference is the other ones are 90 degrees. Well, as you can see, that corner is smashed. I managed to knock this finished piece off of the edge and fall on the concrete below. So that's what those pieces are doing there. I have had to cut these screws out. If anyone knows of a composite deck screw that does not break when you try to remove it, please let me know, because it is just torture getting these things out. I ended up using 4 metal cutting saw blades that just, look at that, it's completely fried. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, these things. And also, if anyone can leave me a comment in the section, I have not found a single metal blade that cuts metal without just turning it red hot and melting through it. Like, these metal blades are just a joke for these things. So if you know of one, please let me know. Anyway, I'm fortunately made this long enough that all I need to do is cut this down a little bit past the damaged area and reinstall these pieces underneath. So it'll still look brand new. And I cut it extra long just in case I needed to. I just didn't want to cut it too short. So a little forgiving. I'm glad I did that. gonna get this fixed and put back up. All right, I test fit this, and we had a little bit of tightness on these pickets. In fact, a lot of them have been tight, so I started to bore them out with the drill bit, even though the pickets are supposed to be 3/4 inch. I mean, it's just way too snug. Boring it out going forward will make the bit catch, and it's just not pretty. So I'm actually going in reverse, and you're gonna stick it in the hole and basically wiggle it around to give it this little bit of play, right? Because these don't need to be firm, right? They're just, once this rail gets bolted in place, the whole thing is going to be secure, and the pickets are just there to make sure no one falls between them. All right, we got that transition done. I'm happy with it. Be fun for the kids to slide down that. One of the fun parts of working on an old deck, if you're adding to it, is things warp and bend and bow over time, so that made this one a little trickier than normal. And I put some extra bolts in to solidify the posts and just reinforce everything. So really glad we ended up replacing all this post lumber as well. It's just a lot more sturdy than what was there before. All right, just wrapped up, got that last corner piece in there. We got a nice continuous line, and then the side piece down there. And I got dimensions and some rough cuts on the handrails, which I'll work on tomorrow in the shop. All right, guys, back in the shop. These are I ripped down some of the Trex boards to hold the pickets on this vertical end for the handrails on the stairs. And then this is another template I'm gonna make to help get those centered. I'm gonna run 45s with my portable press. Start with 1/4, bore up to 3/8, kind of work my way up to 3/4 so I can just clamp this to those things and make a process out of it with the 3/4 inch bit when I get to the Trex. All right, template's all set up. It's not only clamped to that vertical piece, see, we're on end. I don't trust the clamps, so I put deck screws about every 16 inches all the way down. We'll drill those, and then we'll move this and get the second half. Just got back from the hardware store. Just wanted to illustrate, this Trex is very demanding of your blades. I'm on drill bit number 4. One of them is at the sharpener, but I can't get them sharpened fast enough, so I keep having to buy them. So yes, a drill bit sharpener is definitely in the queue if I keep doing these Trex things. And those bits, this is probably gone through 5 of these so far. Anyway, back to work. Stay tuned. Just a little pointer here. Since I'm screwing these in to the side that I'm looking at, it kind of creates this hole, and it's sort of puckered up. But since this is Trex, it's really pliable. You can just smack that down. You can see the difference between one that's been flushed and one that hasn't. And it pretty much covers up the hole. I mean, you can still see it, but the distance we'll be looking at it, it's not going to be noticeable. Okay, time to attach the underside rail to the bottom of the top rail. These are what's going to hold the pickets, of course. And I'm going to use a 1.25 inch, or sorry, 1.5 inch. This is actually a pocket hole screw. The reason I'm using that is because it's self-tapping and it should thread right into the Trex. It also has a flat pan head, which will give more strength and resistance. Plus, I can't really see what I'm doing in there. You know, we're going in almost 3 inches, and I don't want to go straight through the material. When that pan head hits, it's going to slow the driver down, and I'll know when the screw is in all the way. So I'm going to try to center those so they don't get in the way of the pickets. And I have this 1/2 inch spacer that I can use to make sure that our sides are equally spaced the whole way, and I'll move that clamp as I go. I'll probably get 1 screw per every 4 holes, and that should be sufficient enough to keep everything straight and sturdy. So you can see I actually decided to go with every hole. Just, you know, screws are cheap, therefore it's cheap insurance, but you can see it's easy to center those, and they're not in the way of where the pickets are. All right, good morning everyone. We're back at the job site. I scribed with a steel rod, one of these actual supports we used, where those handrails need to sit in order to be the same height and angle. And I went ahead and we just basically copied the old ones, which were not exact. And so I want these to be nice. So I made them so they all line up. And with the skill saw, I got halfway through there, a little bit further than halfway, and the rest of it, I'm just gonna use that existing cut space to guide my reciprocating saw and finish those off. So I had that top rail test fit, and then I basically scribed where to cut the bottom one using the level, and also measured my distances, and I intentionally drilled these base holes shorter than I needed to because I didn't want to overdo it. But that means now I'm drilling them as deep as they need to be, which is basically all the way through. And so once I get these all drilled out, I'm gonna go ahead and affix this lower rail to the stair rail as a permanent fixture, get the pickets in there, and then work on getting that top rail and the pickets attached to the top. Okay, I got the lower rail attached with a few 3-inch SDS screws, and I'm gonna put some more in, but I'm gonna be using countersunk deck screws, and I'm gonna drill in sideways, sort of on an angle like so, into the hole, so that way the screw heads will be countersunk and invisible and not in the way of the deck rails. I'm gonna do that in about 4 or 5 places up and down this lower rail. I just put a small deck screw in the top of that. That's gonna hold that in place on the top post up there. So I don't have to worry about having someone else hold it for me, and then I can clamp the back in place. I'm just gonna go ahead and test fit this, make sure I have enough clearance for my pickets to get in. Looks like a good fit. Just gotta put the rest in and get that top back on. Got all the pickets in, made any necessary adjustments with the drill bit to get them to go straight how I want them. And looks like they're all in the right spot. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that top rail on now. Should take a little finagling, but we'll get it done. All right, I got the rail sort of just sitting on these pickets, but there's some clearance we need to knock down. So I have an engineer's mallet and a piece of scrap just to make sure I don't mar up the finish. I'm gonna give that a good whack up and down until it's flush. All right, got that thing on with a combination of the mallet, the hose clamps, and smashed fingers. Nothing like smashing your fingers with a 3-pound mallet. Thank God I had gloves on. I don't think it's broken. It's probably just a bruise, but gonna get this sucker bolted in. I'll show you how I have this at the top. I'm using the SDS screws. They just have a really good bite. I'm gonna put that in through the other 2, and that should hold it in place just fine. All right, one side down, onto the next. Just wanted to show you what I did on the other side. See, I put that screw in there where I want that, and then the gravity is pulling that screw into that post, which holds the top still, and then I clamp the bottom, and that's allowed me to scribe the back of this piece here, so I know where to cut it on both ends. And then it'll also hold it in place when I do some other things later too. Okay, you can see I've got that line scribed. I'm gonna just cut it down right there with the miter saw. I don't think I showed you on this side, the other side, so I'm doing it here. I have the level on the edge of the picket, top and bottom, and made sure that I adjusted that base, because that's where the top's gonna sit. I want that base to line up so all these pickets are vertical. And now I got that clamped in place, and then come around the back of that and scribe it, and I'm gonna cut that line there and on the bottom. See, I made these little oversized so that I could scribe it. And that's gonna give us good vertical pulls, and it'll also tell me where I need to put this. I just basically run the end of this up to the post, and that's where it's gonna go. Got both handrails in, pretty happy with how they came out. And now I'm gonna work on this corner here. It's not quite a 45, so I scribed the corner, and then I'm gonna scribe this. Of course, that needs to be cut smaller than that. I'm gonna go a little bit at a time because this stuff's expensive. I'll take a few cuts to get that right. Okay, we got a pretty good fit there. Meets up nicely. I can squeeze that together once I get over there. That's all I'm gonna do for today. It's getting cold out and the sun's almost down. At least I got this cut. I can take that back to the shop and build the underside for it, and while I'm at it, get the bottom rail going. See you in the shop tomorrow. All right, back in the shop Saturday morning, and I got this first one. This is the base. Got that cut and drilled already. And I had a piece of scrap that was just 1 hole short, so since this is all gonna be on the back of an area, and the front of this gets fronted with a fresh piece that is whole, I'm gonna save $100 by not having to rip into another one of those 16-foot boards by using this piece here. I'll get that cut installed on the bottom, and then I'll get that fascia piece in front of it and then install the base there as well. All right, back at the job site. It is a windy SOB today, and it's in the 30s, so this doesn't take too long. I got the base installed, and I'm about to put the last pickets in, the final stretch. I can't wait. We'll have a final video here pretty soon. All right, final one installed. Yay. All right, so now I'm just gonna take my cordless grinder and hit these corners, anything that's sharp, so we don't get anyone cut on them. And then in the center of some of these, that one doesn't look too bad. Some of them I couldn't get down hard enough with the mallet, so I'm gonna use these big pipe clamps and squeeze them down so they're flush. Then we'll get a tour and call it a job complete. Well, I figure the best place to get a final view of the deckwork is from on top of the van, and that saved. It was probably material-wise a fourth of the cost of what Trex wants for their materials. With labor, it should come out to about just the Trex alone cost minus the labor. So I'm pretty sure Kate's pretty happy. There's the handrails down there. Real happy with how those came out. And now I have deck envy. Not that I didn't already. Look at that view. It's the Rocky Mountains. But anyway, you know, DIY. Hopefully this video gave you guys enough. So if you like that video and you want to see more DIY stuff, carpentry, mechanics, cooking, I just try to do everything myself as much as I can with a little help from my friends. And if you guys like that video, please like it in the thumbs up below and give me some comments if you have questions. Share with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks again.
So tight. That's beautiful, man. It's gorgeous.
Go check out the stairs.
Yeah, that's what I got you found.
That's the best part.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. I like how you fill the gap right here.
Transition. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, this is sweet. Holy cow, Susan's gonna love this. I like this.
Sweet, man. Thank you.
So nice. Holy cow.
Good for sliding down too. You know, you could have races.
Oh, yeah. Don't tell my kids that. That's all I need is this. Wow, this is awesome.